Welcome back to another episode of Underrated. It's been a couple of weeks. How you doing, Bo?
Lefty, welcome back to us, my friend. It has been an eventful few weeks, has it?
It has, a couple of things in our personal lives going on, but we are back.
Yeah, man, it's good to be back at it again. I feel like there's so much ground to cover here. I don't even know where to begin, but that's why I'm looking forward to today's show for sure.
Absolutely. Last time we got together, it was summer. Now it's college football season.
That's right. Wow, it's the end of a season. They're serving pumpkin everything at Starbucks. That's how I know.
Exactly. Although I feel like that's a little earlier every year somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's jump into some headlines, man. We got some exciting stuff going on. One of the all-time greatest athletes of my generation, Serena Williams, played in the last match of her legendary career. She lost in the third round of the U.S. Open the other day in front of a crowd that read like an award show guest list. Lots of athletes, stars, including Tiger Woods, Russell Wilson, Spike Lee, Mike Tyson. All those folks were in attendance to watch the 23-time Grand Slam winner play for what ended up being the last time. That's 7 Australian Open victories, 7 Wimbledon titles, 6 U.S. Open tourneys, and 3 French Open wins, in addition to so many other awards. Congratulations to one of the GOATs, right? Serena Williams.
Absolutely. What a phenomenal career. And while I think a lot of people hoped for some swan song magic, unfortunately we didn't get that, but at the same time, quite a venerable career.
Absolutely. Still thrilling to watch. A few clips from the crowd showed some famous athletes like New York Giants running backs Saquon Barkley, just completely enthralled with, Serena and, excited. And, it's been a great career and many decades of outstanding play. Just, hugely influential, iconic athlete.
Absolutely. Again, what a phenomenal career, and congrats to her. And kind of tangentially related, one of the players that kind of cites her as one of the tennis players that kind of cites her as a huge influence, Coco Gauff, moved on to the quarterfinals today. So
absolutely,
we kind of see, the next generation of stars that were born of her legacy.
Definitely pass the torch.
Absolutely.
Good way. Huge news in the NBA. Another massive trade. Another player from the Utah Jazz, Donovan Mitchell, traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers on Thursday. So if you recall, they just traded Rudy Gobert not too long ago. We covered that in one of our earlier episodes, Lefty. Mitchell has been the face of the franchise the last few years and is one of the game's most electric young stars. The Jazz are getting 3 players, and they're getting 3 first-round picks in return. They got the rights to swap 2 other future picks. For our fair-weather NBA fans, just a reminder that the Cavs finished 6 games above 500 last season. That was good for 9th in the Eastern Conference. And prior to this trade, they already have 2 All-Stars in their lineup in guard Darius Garland, center Jared Allen. They also have Rookie of the Year runner-up Evan Mobley, who looks like he's going to absolutely be a future All-Star. So, this without a doubt on paper turns them into a real contender and with staying power. A flip side of that for the Jazz, between the Gobert trade and this one, they now have 13 unprotected or lightly protected first-round picks through 2029. They got 2 2022 first-round picks from the draft earlier this year to plug right in, and Agbaji and Walker Kessler. So, talk about wins all around here. Finally, something to look forward to in Cleveland.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a lot to look forward to in Cleveland, but at least they have, some semi-bright basketball future, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the growth in both these franchises. I think Utah is making the right moves, knowing that they have to rebuild. Cleveland is adding the right pieces, and it's exciting to see life after LeBron, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and after it's not just the draft picks coming back to Utah. They also got Colin Sexton, who looked poised to be a real star after 2020. Only played in 11 games last season, but if he can return to full strength and mature the way that he was expected to in Cleveland, he could be a real star there.
I absolutely think he can, and I think he's going to be a key piece in kind of the glue that's going to hold this young team together as they continue to evolve. It's going to be great for both franchises. I think that might be a long shot, but I really do have high hopes for both of them. Lefty, I didn't think it was going to happen, but Manchester United handed the Arsenal their first loss of the season with that 3-1 win at Old Trafford.
Yeah, they've come out of nowhere in the last few weeks. After that thrashing by Brentford, they've
that's right.
Stepped it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony made his debut appearance, obviously after his Ajax transfer just a few days back, and scored a huge goal for the Red Devils. That's 4 in a row, and like you said, after the Brighton and Brentford losses, Man U has ended Arsenal's win streak and extended their own. So they're playing well right now.
Yeah, they're only 3 points out of top of the table.
They're
just behind Arsenal now, and they're in a top 5 position, so they're ready to play another year of European football. But I was really surprised to see Marcus Rashford get a couple of goals. There was a lot of talk last year about how he was kind of washed. I think a lot of that stemmed from the scheme he was in last season, and just the hatred of any player that does anything that's morally good.
Obviously, we saw a lot of Rashford. Saka obviously made impacts, but if you watch the highlights closely, I had to say Christian Eriksen was the secret weapon there. 2 quick passes forward that set up their first 2 goals. He got an assist himself by laying on the third for Rashford. Interesting. Cristiano Ronaldo also still looking for his first goal of the season. One of the longest scoreless droughts to start a season ever in his career. What are your thoughts on Ronaldo and his future with the Red Devils?
Well, that he's there now, at least until January. He wanted out.
Right.
Couldn't find a partner for any kind of swap there. But with Anthony from coming over from Ajax, there's nothing. There's no real space for him. He's not as good as his replacement now.
Right.
And, he's a late time sub now. He might get a bit of play because they're still competing. In foreign tournament play. They've got a game in a couple of days in the Europa League, but
sure.
His time in the Premier League as a starter is over, and it's not coming back. He'll probably look for a move to the Middle East or China or something now.
Somewhere, right?
The only places that are going to play him just for his name recognition.
Right, absolutely. I agree. He is still a big name. He still does compete at a fairly decent level when he is on, but it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, absolutely. So, we're back at it. Let's get into the good stuff, Lefty. I'm going to start with you. Who do you want to discuss today?
Well, I don't know how much you followed it, Bo, but last week, the Major League Baseball Players Association took a massive step towards fixing one of the biggest problems in all of American sports. The association sent out union authorization cards to minor league players in an unprecedented move that will allow those players to vote for an election that could make them full members of the Players Association.
Wow. That's historic.
Yeah, it's a massive step towards correcting one of the most egregious pay problems that plague the minor leagues. They're leagues in which the average salary for the vast majority of players is between $5,000 and $14,000 a year.
Jeez, that's. How do you even? Most of these guys have to work, 2 jobs, obviously, but it's so difficult, the wear and tear as a minor league baseball player.
Absolutely, and many of them are not American and struggle to find alternative work in the off season, and are kind of trying to live off of pretty low bonuses that they signed maybe 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah, but as I said, this is a huge step in terms of labor negotiations in American sports, and one that to me harkens back to a baseball player that 52 years ago took on Major League Baseball and their antiquated rules of player ownership and ultimately won. Today, I want to talk about a player that truly paved the way for the fair play of minor leaguers, a player whose legacy might be the most meaningful in the last half-century of sports, former outfielder Curt Flood.
Curt Flood. Oh, yeah. All right, I got to love this. The Cardinals fan. This guy's Kurt's royalty in St. Louis.
Yeah, as you said, he's best remembered for his time with the Cardinals in St. Louis, where he played in parts of 12 seasons. As a player, his numbers aren't exactly Hall of Fame worthy on their own. But he was one of the best players in the league and the type of player that any fan, coach, organization would want to have on their roster. After 2 seasons and 8 games in Cincinnati, Flood was traded to the Cardinals, where he played the majority of his career. In those 12 seasons in St. Louis, he accumulated 42.3 wins above replacement, had 1,853 hits, all while hitting a respectable .293 with an OPS of .733.
Just a horse, man. Just so good.
Yeah. So during his age 25 season with the Redbirds, he kind of broke out. He started a 7-year stretch that saw him win 7 consecutive Gold Glove awards, make 3 All-Star appearances, and garner MVP votes in 6 consecutive seasons, on top of 2 World Series wins. Pretty decent playing career.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's only a portion of his career. Obviously, the biggest part of his career, as he only played for 2 other teams outside of that. But, yeah, I mean, absolutely
he only played 20 other games the rest of his career.
Right.
But despite all of that success over the previous decade plus in St. Louis, Flood was traded following the 1969 season to the Philadelphia Phillies. And Flood did not want to play in Philadelphia. He thought the stadium was trash, the facilities were trash, the teams were trash, and the fans were trash. And,
if Curt was around, we could assure him that has not changed.
Not at all. But in modern American sports, it's common for players to reach free agency and sign new contracts that often include clauses that put restrictions on trade agreements. We also currently have 10 and 5 rights, so any player that has played at least 10 years in the major leagues, and 5 of those happening with their current team, can refuse any trade they want. But this wasn't the case in 1969. Free agency didn't exist in 1969. At the time, the rights to a player were held by a team even after the expiration of any playing contract they had signed under what was called the reserve clause. Players had zero ability to determine the location they played other than to hold out and not play, hoping that maybe they'd be released or maybe they'd be traded to a different team.
All right. And
holding out, it's exactly what Curt Flood did.
Yeah.
And after a meeting with the Players Association in that 1969-70 offseason, in which he informed that the union was willing to fund a lawsuit on his behalf, Flood held out for that 1970 season and instead lobbied then-Commissioner Bowie Kuhn to grant him free agency. Kuhn obviously denied that request, and when that request was denied, Flood, backed by the Players Association, sued Bowie Kuhn and Major League Baseball for $1 million.
That's right.
Pretty low amount, but he filed suit and the union backed him up.
That's right.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too into the weeds here, so I'll try to be brief. No, this is not a Supreme Court podcast.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But anyway, this lawsuit eventually made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and Flood lost that battle. He did not win in the Supreme Court.
That's right.
Surprisingly, the Supreme Court affirmed Major League Baseball's reserve clause and antitrust status. And everybody was shocked. Fans, writers, scholars, anyone that attended the trial was surprised. Because in actuality, the legal argument by Major League Baseball in the Supreme Court was non-existent. Flimsy at best. And, while the Supreme Court made one decision, the Court of Public Opinion had come to a different conclusion, and it was the opposite one. Historian Lee Lowenfish found that polling at the time found that around 90% of the general public supported Curt Flood, which is just nothing has ever been that popular.
All right.
I don't think Christmas or Santa or Jesus are that popular. So in spite of this decision by the Supreme Court, the Players Association used the case as a springboard to put enhanced pressure on the MLB, to end that reserve clause. And after years of bargaining meetings and pressure, an arbiter opened up the door to free agency in 1976. And in 1976, free agency took effect in baseball.
That's
Players then had the sovereignty to, after their initial contract ended, sign wherever they want and do whatever they want. And so at the end of the life of a contract, players were granted the ability to sign with any team. But, after that loss in court and missing out on the entire 1970 season, Flood never returned to form. He had strong support from almost all players because they knew what he did for them. But he really didn't return after that fight. He signed with Washington in 1971, and he only played in 13 more games before he stepped away for personal reasons and retired at the age of 33. Pretty sad end to his career. But ultimately, it's Flood's legacy off the field that makes him such an important player in my eyes. His willingness to sacrifice his own playing career for what he believed was morally right can't be understated. Ultimately, Flood changed the game of baseball and really all sports. Modern athletes have the power, the power that they have because of the sacrifice Flood made. Despite the huge contributions Flood made, the recognition never came for Flood. Despite being up for induction into the Hall of Fame by the Veterans Committee just this past season, in which the Players Associations in almost every major sport and over 100 members of Congress signed a letter in his support, Flood was denied entrance into a museum that celebrates the game that he left an indelible mark upon. So,
it's a shame.
Yeah. So, Bo, after a conversation about Curt Flood and his career on and off the field, do you think Curt Flood is underrated?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Not just saying this as a Cardinals fan, but touching on what he was trying to do for the game of baseball. 1998 in St. Louis alone for the Cardinals organization was a huge year. Obviously, that was the home run chase, for Mark McGwire and Roger Maris's record. But, that was also the year that the federal government passed the Curt Flood Act. The act passed by Congress and signed into law by Bill Clinton at the time, it did exactly what Flood was shooting for. It stopped owners from controlling the players' contracts and their careers. And, I remember being a young man, obviously, and my father trying to explain to me how this worked and not really having an understanding. But, Curt Flood compared it to slavery. He felt, like you had said, that players should have the right to consider offers from other clubs before making any decisions. They're not pieces of property. And I don't think Curt Flood ever set out to be a politician or an advocate for any specific cause or anything like that. This came from a different place. It was deeper than that. Obviously, the 10-5 rule, as you mentioned earlier, it's also called the Curt Flood rule. These are rights that you were really owed as a player. And it's funny. It always struck me as interesting that the government that had always backed the union who based values on seniority and different rights never recognized this. So that's something I always found interesting as well. But if we're talking about being recognized for not only his career, but his career off the field, without a doubt, Curt Flood is absolutely underrated in every sense of the word.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. We could have a conversation about how he's underrated as a player if he had just retired after 1969.
For sure.
Without any other action. 42 WAR over 12 seasons, pretty good accomplishment.
Very much.
But taking into account everything else that he contributed to not just the game of baseball, but to professional sports as a whole, is really something that, as I mentioned, just can't go overstated.
Definitely. And he was essentially blackballed from the game. I mean, you can't look at it any other way. So, I mean, yes, obviously his career ended at still a younger age. I mean, obviously we see players play well into their late 30s and even 40s now, as we're seeing. But, I mean, Curt Flood was pushed out of the game as well, for stating his own beliefs. And, that in itself is an injustice.
Yeah, and you have to also factor in he came into the league less than 10 years after Jackie Robinson. This is a newly integrated sport, and he took this major step as a black athlete, not just as a player who saw an injustice of being unfairly owned by another organization, but as a player that already had so much to lose.
Sure.
In the wake of the civil rights movement, still at full strength in 1970, he took this major step and, went in front of the Supreme Court and really sacrificed his entire career, just so other players would have a better livelihood.
Absolutely. Well said. It's unfortunate. And, another case of what could have been, right? What could have been with 4 or 5 more years in the league, and what more could he have accomplished? And if times had been different, challenging times, obviously, the Vietnam War, civil rights, different things happening in the country at that time, a very chaotic time in our history here in the U.S., unfortunately. But yes, absolutely agree. Curt Flood, very much underrated.
Yeah, and he talked about, I saw some quotes about him talking about, at the time, just black consciousness as a whole was something at the forefront of everyone.
Sure.
Everyone was thinking about the social good of things at the time, and he leaned towards the social good over his own playing career and his own, financial stability.
Right.
So for that, absolutely underrated, as we both said, and definitely a player that I think more people should be aware of.
Sure.
Just as fans of sports in general. I don't know how much his influence stretches in baseball, but definitely outside of baseball, I think that the way that he contributed to, just the structure of sports is super important. It's hard to imagine at this point sports without free agency.
Right, absolutely. Any athlete who's trying to negotiate or sign a contract, Curt Flood should be on their minds. It absolutely, the process wouldn't be where it was without him. He was on his own, single-handedly innovative, but it fell on deaf ears, at that time, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it was only 6 more years before free agency was enacted fully in baseball. And, now in 2022, a different injustice is being
for sure
is being fought by the Players Association, and hopefully in 50 years there's somebody talking about some of the innovators of unionizing minor league baseball.
Definitely, it's coming around full circle. It's in the process. I hope it fully gets there. So absolutely.
Yeah. So we're gonna take a quick break, and we will be right back to discuss another athlete. And we are back. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. Is there anybody you wanted to talk about today, Bo?
Yeah, obviously we just witnessed opening week of the NCAA football season, Lefty. We're going to go into that more at the end of the show, but in honor of the opening weekend, I'm going to cover an athlete who could be considered one of the best NCAA quarterbacks ever statistically. But also, in my opinion, an argument for being highly overlooked. Lefty, I feel so many NCAA athletes have these amazing careers, but when it doesn't translate over into the pros, I feel like some of them are just forgotten about.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about one of my favorite athletes?
Oh man, I don't know.
You're gonna disappoint me by not talking about Kellen Moore, who's a frequent
Yes, I am gonna disappoint you. He is mentioned. We are gonna talk a little bit about Kellen Moore. He plays a role in this, but are there any athletes that you have weirdly and or coincidentally just somehow like end up being connected to through your life? And I know this is an odd question, but I'm talking more like maybe like an athlete from a college you root for or a college you went to, they get drafted by the local pro team in your city or your favorite team, and it just, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, you know, I just moved away from Eugene, Oregon, where there were a couple local quarterbacks who they weren't drafted locally, but they played a big role in public consciousness long after they were drafted. And then growing up in Indiana near Purdue, for decades, people followed Drew Brees.
Sure.
Across the country, you could just walk around rural central Indiana and see New
course.
Orleans Saints jerseys.
Of course, it's and the athlete I want to talk about today. For some reason, he and I just keep crossing paths, and I'm sure he'll pick up on this as we discuss further. But more importantly, we're gonna, cover a pretty impressive NCAA career. He's seen continued success as a backup in the NFL now, as well as a few years as a bona fide starter. I'm talking about former University of Houston QB and current backup QB for the Buffalo Bills. That's Case Keenum. So. Lefty, obviously, that last sentence probably connects a few dots for you, I'm sure. Case Keenum. Case Keenum was he was the quarterback for the Houston Cougars when I was there, so I did get to see him in person. He was drafted by the Houston Texans, but it was also the time spent with the St. Louis Rams, who became the LA Rams, where he was able to get to showcase his skills and start some games, which then led to stints with the Vikings. Where he had his most successful career in the NFL, and it was a tremendous one. And that led to opportunities in Denver, Washington, Cleveland, and finally now is Josh Allen's backup in Buffalo. But, that being said, we're going to talk about his 4+ years as a Cougar. So, Lefty, when I think of great college quarterbacks, but more so, accomplishments in just the last 25 years, I think of names like Tebow, Vince Young, Baker Mayfield, Mariota, Joe Burrow, Landry Jones, and Kellen Moore, as you had mentioned, Boise State. Anyone you really remember that stood out to you that maybe I didn't mention right there?
Colt McCoy was a good one.
Yeah, Colt. I thought I was like anyone aside from Drew Brees, Kyle Orton, and Aiden O'Connell.
No, a little more than that. The other Colt Brennan was another one that
Colt Brennan for Hawaii. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that era to me always stands out. A lot of those mid-major colleges had
definitely
just crazy high-flying offenses. And
definitely, that was
obviously you're going to talk about that here shortly.
Yeah. Hawaii, a couple great Colt Brennan and Timmy Chang. Those guys were some outstanding quarterbacks. So let's keep these guys in mind. But just a little background on Case. Redshirted his freshman year at Houston in 2006. Kevin Cobb was the quarterback, and the Cougars won the Conference USA Championship that season, only to lose to South Carolina in the Liberty Bowl. That's 44-36. Kevin Cobb gets drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles, so Keenum now has an opportunity to compete for the starting job. He eventually was chosen as a starter and showcased his outstanding pocket presence along with his efficient passing, throwing, and good legs. 2007, the Cougars finished 8-5 under Art Briles in his final season before he went over to Baylor. And they go on to play TCU in the Texas Bowl, only to lose again, 20-13. But Keenum had a solid season. Nearly 2,300 passing yards, 14 touchdown passes, 9 rushing TDs. His sophomore year, even better statistically. Second player in school history to complete over 5,000 passing yards in one season. I mean, he led the nation in total offense that year. He was runner-up in passing yards. The Cougars again went 8-5, but they did beat the only 2 ranked teams they faced. That was number 23 ECU and number 25 Tulsa, and finally won a bowl game in the Armed Forces Bowl. Fast forward, 2009 again, huge year. Team goes 10-4. Keenum ends the season with 48 total touchdowns, over 5,800 total offensive yards. They upset the only ranked team they faced, number 5 Oklahoma State, in a shocking 45-35 win. That put them at number 17 in the country the following week after that. But, they again meet Air Force in the Armed Forces Bowl and get stomped. So, 2010, Keenum tears his ACL in Game 3 of the season. So he takes that year to focus on earning a bachelor's degree in business, and he was granted another year of eligibility by the NCAA. 2011, the Cougars were 12-0. They're going into their last game of the season. It's number 7 in the country. They get defeated by number 24 Southern Miss for their first loss. But they did go on to face number 24 Penn State in the Ticket City Bowl and won 30-14. Now, remember all those names we mentioned earlier, Lefty? The one player who has more passing yards in NCAA history is not named Mayfield or Moore or Jones. It's Case Keenum, and he still holds that record with 19,217 yards passing. Now, some might say, okay, he got another year of eligibility. That's fine. Even if you erase those 3 games, he would still have over 1,500 more pass yards than the next QB in line, Chang, who we mentioned from Hawaii.
That's just an insane production.
Yeah. Cruise through other records here. Passing TDs. Keenum, also number 1 all time, 155. Kellen Moore second on that list with 142. Completions, Case is number 1, 1,546 completions all time. That's 142 more than number 2 on that list. Want to talk about accolades? 2-time Sammy Baugh Trophy winner. That's top collegiate passer. First team All-American. 2-time Conference USA MVP. 2-time first All Conference USA. Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, all the records, the accolades, and at a virtually unrecognized football program, if you're talking bigger picture, all that just to enter the 2012 NFL draft where he went undrafted. Dude, the disrespect here, Lefty.
Yeah,
jeez.
Absolutely. It was a tough time for those mid-major quarterbacks then.
Yeah, you've heard this story. Look up all-time greatest NCAA QBs, and I'll be shocked if Case Keenum even cracks the top 10, all-time and on some of these lists. So I got to ask you, is Case Keenum accurately recognized for putting up monster numbers against competitive but not powerhouse competition, or is he another Conference USA casualty with talent that is clearly underrated?
I think that he is definitely underrated. And his talent is demonstrated just by the fact that he's still in the league.
For sure.
He's what, 30, late 30s, mid 30s.
Yeah, mid 30s. Yeah.
And he's still kicking around. Obviously, probably doesn't have the qualities to start in the NFL and never did.
For sure.
But at the same time, his college career was more impressive than almost anyone. There's a lot to be said about, strength of schedule and Conference USA's strength just as a conference.
Sure.
But at the same time, crazy numbers, just insane production. Almost 20,000 yards. In 4 seasons threw for more than 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. That's just insane production.
Right.
We see Conference USA play every year, and that doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a testament to that. And I think that he also succeeded in an era when we saw what college offense was change.
Right.
The run was dying. We saw it a few years earlier also in Texas with Graham Harrell.
Absolutely.
Yep. Just blow up at Texas Tech. And, just a few years later, we saw all of the mid-majors kind of exploit that same offense, whether it be Hawaii, Boise State, Houston, just
definitely
explode through the air. And it really changed what we thought about what a college football offense could be. It wasn't Mike Allstott in the 90s again,
Right.
We changed to incredibly pass-heavy offensive, across the sport. And just in terms of, succeeding in a thing that didn't exist, really much before he played. He really changed the game of football and what mid-majors could do. A few years of being ranked can change the trajectory of a program. Houston is a much stronger program because of him.
Definitely.
And, he was incredibly successful there and definitely underrated.
Definitely. There was a string of success. When I first got there, obviously Kevin Kolb was a outstanding quarterback and it had about the same amount of success in the NFL, I would say. Never put up the starting numbers like, Case Keenum did his one big year in Minnesota. I think he had 27 touchdowns and 5 interceptions that year. I mean, it was one outstanding year, but he had a great offensive line and a lot of weapons around him. But there was a good string of great quarterbacking there in Houston, and it put, like you said, Conference USA on the map. People started caring about what was happening at Rice and Tulsa and schools like that all of a sudden, because these numbers were insane. These were video game numbers. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that Case Keenum, again, is one of those athletes who had an outstanding career. I feel like if any other quarterback, who was at maybe in Oklahoma or, say, in Alabama, put up those types of numbers. I mean, we're looking at the number 1 pick in the draft. From the get-go, I don't think that his abilities were ever really, respected. He's had his opportunities. It hasn't translated as well over. So, in this sense, the NFL scouts, whether it was the teams, I mean, he was on some terrible Texans teams, some terrible Rams teams, terrible Cleveland Browns teams, one good team he's played for prior to, suiting up for the Bills here. So, I mean, who knows, right? But
yeah. Well, and another thing that, was touched upon, just awards, never really finishing even top 5 for the Heisman is just another level of disrespect. But, I think the fact that he's still in the league is a testament to the value that players, that organizations are now putting on players that have shown success at that level.
Definitely.
That while the physical abilities might not translate perfectly to the NFL, there's still inherent value in that, whether it be by the fact that he's still in the league or that at the same age, Kellen Moore is an offensive coordinator.
Definitely.
And we've also kind of see, obviously, the raw attributes, size and all that are a little different. But, I mean, we saw a Conference USA quarterback with pretty similar numbers to Keenum get drafted in the 4th round this year in Bailey Zappi.
Exactly.
Obviously
some crazy numbers at was it Western Kentucky? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the yardage wasn't that different. He just had more touchdowns, which comes down to luck a lot of times when you're talking about that little gap. So there's inherent value there, and it's being recognized across the league. So yeah, I'd say definitely underrated. But the fact that he's still in the league, I'd say that he's underrated, but definitely properly valued, at least in the league.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think he'll end up taking the same route as Kellen Moore. He's just known as he has the mind. He understands the game very well, but it just, again, as we said, sometimes just doesn't translate. Specifically with quarterbacks, you and I talked about this privately just with our Trey Lance conversation.
Yeah.
A quarterback has to be in a specific offense, and it has to be built around that. We've seen huge, just complete flubs as, the Joey Harringtons and the Derek Carrs and guys like that. And it's because they were put into offenses and they had to learn those offenses.
Yeah,
it wasn't built based on what their strengths and weaknesses were. So, hopefully Trey Lance isn't a victim of that.
Yeah, well, and I think that I don't know how accurate this is, but I feel like the climb from a place like South Dakota State, being what are they now, 1AA, or was that the former name?
Division 2.
It changed like a decade ago, but
right.
I feel like that climb's even more difficult than from a mid-major. So hopefully Trey Lance succeeds. And I just wanted to kind of just briefly touch upon the fact that, we talked about the must-watch, home run race of 98.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid growing up in the late 2000s, the mid-major quarterback explosion, the Kellen Moores, the Hawaii quarterbacks, even Case Keenum, those were must-watch games. They were things
Absolutely.
that we came to school and talked about every Monday.
Yeah.
A kid a couple lockers down from me had a Hawaii football sweatshirt, and a Boise State one, because it was must-watch football. It was
a fun time, man.
Yeah, it was
I think it's a completely, in itself, an underrated time in college football. That's what really stuck out to me. But when kind of thinking about this, I've kind of had this one in my back pocket here, waiting on the college football season to start. But yeah, I 100% agree. That was such a fun time. I was lucky enough to go to a game against the biggest rival, Rice University and University of Houston are just crosstown rivals. It's a huge thing. There must have been 50,000 people at that game, but outstanding. Case Keenum was electric at that time, and he could do it on the ground as well. So dual threat. Just an innovator in that time, but just a fun part of college quarterback history.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely an underrated player in my opinion, at least for his college contributions.
For sure, yeah.
Is there anything coming up in the sports world you're excited about this week?
Yeah, we've entered the last month of the MLB regular season. It's really hard to believe that there's only about 30 games left until the playoffs begin.
Yeah,
right?
It's we're down to the wire in a lot of these races.
Things really start to get interesting, Lefty. So let's talk about the standings right now. So the Yankees have just been falling apart since the All-Star break, right? This could be a monumental collapse with the Rays and the Blue Jays continuing to play how they are.
It kind of spins an earlier conversation this year about the AL MVP race on its head, where people have talked about Ohtani's so good, but what does he do for his team? And here we have Aaron Judge just still hitting the lights out of the ball every day.
Right, exactly.
While the team collapses. So
right.
I think that argument's a little funny to me.
Yeah, exactly. The Baltimore Orioles, what a season this team is continuing to have.
Absolutely.
They're only a couple games behind, the Blue Jays there. I mean, AL Central, as we sit right now, could go a number of ways. It's pretty rough over there. We could be here sitting talking about your AL Central champion White Sox in a few weeks, though.
I'm hopeful. I'm not optimistic. That team does not deserve to be in the playoffs, but I really hope that they do make it, just to prove what a drain Tony La Russa has been on the squad.
Right.
For those that don't know, White Sox manager and Civil War veteran, I believe, Tony La Russa, is out indefinitely with an undisclosed medical condition. There's speculation among fans that that condition doesn't exist. The organization is just too cowardly to even fire a manager. But they've won 3 of 5 since he stepped away, and 3 of 4 since he's been out labeled indefinitely. So they're streaking at the right time. So they could, especially as they have their 2.5 games back in the division, and they've got 4 more games against the division leader, Cleveland Guardians. So it's wide open there.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be interesting for sure. The St. Louis Cardinals have been playing some of the best baseball they could play, which, they also did at this time last year. I think they were 8 or 8.5 games ahead of the Brewers right now.
Yeah. They're surging as the Brewers are just falling apart.
It's hard to even fathom a few weeks ago that this would turn around so quickly. I thought that this was going to be a tight one. Sort of like, the Mets and Braves neck and neck right now. But I don't know who can beat the Dodgers at this point in time.
Yeah, it's remarkable. They keep having pitchers go down with injuries, losing players, and they've just got reinforcement after reinforcement. We're 4 days into September, and they've already got 91 wins.
They they just continue to perform, and at this level, I mean, this could be a record-setting ball club here.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks to be, unless something goes, drastically wrong here. This might be the most wins we've ever seen.
Yeah, what is that total? What's the 116?
116, yeah.
I don't know if they can reach that, but it's definitely well within reach.
Right.
It's possible.
I haven't seen their schedule. It's since the All-Star break. I just looked at it earlier. The St. Louis Cardinals have only lost 11 games since the All-Star break, which in itself is pretty remarkable, right? I feel like the Dodgers are a much better team. They're just a much better team.
Yeah, they're on a different plane of existence.
Yeah,
They do,
like I said, yeah,
they do end the season with a 3-game series against your Cardinals.
Yeah.
So I think that will be a very good litmus test for the playoffs.
Sure. That'll be probably a sneak preview to what we'll see further into the playoffs. But
yeah, it's just remarkable how the Padres could trade for a player that is arguably the best player in the league and are still almost 20 games back. They still can't beat the Dodgers.
I mean, that's a testament just to how good they've been this year. This has been a remarkable season for them. I mean, it's so cool to watch. I gotta say, I'm not a Dodgers fan at all, but I mean, for a team to be this darn good is pretty crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, and what's remarkable, and kind of something that's I think isn't discussed enough, is how good the Astros are doing this season. I mean, they're sitting at 86 wins, well within reach of 100 as well. They won't push that record of 116, but they're clear favorites in the American League and could be a formidable opponent for the Dodgers.
Sure, I think people have come to expect this performance from the Astros because it's been going on for so many years now. But don't take it for granted. I mean, it's really crazy to see a team perform at this high level consistently for so long.
Yeah, especially after losing someone like Carlos Correa. We've seen huge replacements with the Dodgers. They've lost players, but they've also brought in, top tier players, whether that be Trey Turner or who else did they bring in last year? They brought in a couple of great players, but Trey Turner kind of headlines that. And the Astros really haven't done that. They've filled these gaps internally with players that are scheme fits. We talk about it with quarterbacks. And they've just got, despite having a pretty lowly farm system, they've got the players to just fill the gaps, and it's working for them.
Definitely. Dusty Baker's got a firm grip with those gloves on that organization. He knows what's going on. This Thursday is the opening day for the NFL, and my Buffalo Bills will be in L.A. to face the Super Bowl defending champs, the Rams. And probably, my opinion and a lot of folks' opinions might be the Super Bowl matchup, depending on things go. So that goes down Thursday night. Everyone can now return to mindlessly watching Red Zone for hours on Sundays in some sort of, stupor, whether that's, alcohol or food driven, depending on what you do. And you can sit there and check your fantasy football teams, making sure they're competitive. But most importantly, the Goodell Show, which the NFL is getting to the point. I think it should be on Bravo or maybe like E! Entertainment. It's so freaking petty, man. I mean, they should bring in Vince McMahon to run it. I mean, I think Goodell and McMahon might be the ultimate just powerhouse to take it to the scripted level. Sunday you'll have the Panthers taking on the Browns, so you're going to have Baker Mayfield facing his former team after he was kicked to the curb for a guy who may not ever play in the NFL again.
I think that's the game that most people are excited about because, I think that outside of maybe 7 people in Cleveland, there is no one not rooting for Baker Mayfield to just
absolutely
beat the shit out of that team.
I was literally going to follow up this statement with there's nothing more I want to see on Sunday than for Baker Mayfield to just slide it. I'd like to see him see further success to, prove that this organization is just garbage. They continue to make bad decisions. I mean, it just, happens over the years. And I'm talking like, Johnny Manziel type of decisions and things that happen there. They're just dramatically awful. But a big Monday night game for you locally, they're going to start it out with Russell Wilson literally just flying back to Seattle in a Broncos uniform to face his former team. Maybe Will Smith will walk into the end zone and slap someone. That's how they put these things together.
Well, and I don't think that anybody in Seattle thinks they're going to win.
Right.
This is the first time, I moved recently, as we talked about on here, and this is the first time I've lived in a city with a major sports team.
That's right, man. I always forget that.
It's remarkable how ubiquitous support for this team is. I was at the grocery store the other day, and the cashier asked me what was happening in the game that was happening at that moment, as if I was somehow not checking out my groceries.
Yeah, right.
But like, there's just unanimous support here. So I think people are going to be pretty sad. They've been spoiled for a long time under Pete Carroll. I
think so too.
The Super Bowl, but also just being a competitive team every year in, year out.
Sure.
Despite glaring holes. It kind of reminds me a lot, actually, of the Peyton Manning era. A lot of those teams had some glaring deficiencies, but you knew they were always going to be competitive. And I think that this is the first year that they're starting out, and people know it's not going to be the same.
Yeah, it might get ugly out there. And here's another thing, we talked about this in other conversations, like this whole thing with the Miami Dolphins and the tanking situation. It's just like, Drew Lock's your quarterback right now. It's like you had the opportunity to get a Garoppolo or to trade for somebody or even bring Baker Mayfield over, and you chose not to do that. So obviously there's got to be a play here, right? Something's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, and I think one difference might be is that I don't know if they have the draft capital to bring anyone in, because they've traded everything away over the last few seasons. Whether it be was it Landon Collins a few years ago? Am I thinking of the right player?
Yep.
They've just made kind of really strange decisions and traded away most of their top picks, and they might just not have the ability to bring anyone in. But,
definitely,
it's definitely going to be a different season this year.
For sure.
One without Russell Wilson, but also Bobby Wagner has been an institution here.
Seeing him in a Rams uniform is going to be very odd. For so many reasons, but the defense in Seattle has always been a huge staple. They've got the DK Metcalf, who with the right quarterback, is a top tier receiver. I don't know how he's going to perform this season, obviously, but in the backfield, even they have Rashad Penny if he can stay healthy, but they also drafted a young man, Kenneth Walker III, I believe, and
who was unstoppable at Michigan State.
Unstoppable, and I think he has a bright future. So there are some things to look forward to.
Yeah, not the same type of back, but coming out of another historic, Big Ten program, maybe he could offer the same lift that the Colts have seen recently.
Exactly. So
it's worth mentioning, while they did lose Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks is just really good.
Right, absolutely.
To stay on brand, supremely underrated linebacker.
Right, definitely, and that played a major role into probably what direction they were headed to. Aside from financially and trying to build their team up, but we'll. They're going to kick it off here in the NFL. There are some good matchups. The wax statue, Tom Brady, is back after being just MIA for 2 weeks.
He did. Was there a confirmation that he was making a little stint on reality television?
I think that's what it was. Which reality show was it again?
The Masked Singer.
Jesus.
You know,
This
I don't
guy.
have cable, so I can only imagine how bad that would be if this actually happened. I'm pretty indifferent either way, but I did see some video of Tom Brady, and he looks like shit, man.
He showed up looking like very gaunt. Okay, I don't know if it was the lighting. He had probably the worst '90s haircut that I've ever seen here recently.
He needs the Drew Brees treatment.
Yeah, that's the way. That's the way to go. Oh my God, College Game Day. That's always interesting watching those pregame shows. I don't know if you saw this going around the internet, but nobody knows who the hell Jack Harlow is.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I can't remember. Was there something in basketball that he did too, where everybody questioned where he was, who he was?
Yeah, I think there was something surrounding that. You know, I don't know if you just saw this, from Saturday, but they had him perform on this stage, and like he's out there, and literally the crowd is just standing still, and nobody's into it, and it's this whole freaking weird thing. Then they have him doing, game day picks. For the Cincy game, he picks Cincy because he's from Kentucky and he used to talk to this girl from Cincinnati. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I was like, what are you guys doing over there? Like, just let Kirk Herbstreit like make an ass out of himself per usual. Like, just go that route.
Mean, it's just kind of proof that any white dude without much talent can become famous.
I was going to say, does anyone even know that Jack Harlow is not black? Is that what this is? Because people are just so, naive and, just in their own, freaking stupid worlds. Just
if you download Melodyne into your Audacity, you can be whoever you want.
There you go. Exactly. Well, again, it'll be interesting. Another good show. It's good to be back, Lefty. Let's not take any more breaks, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in today. We discussed Curt Flood and former Houston quarterback Case Keenum. And again, thanks for sticking with us despite this break. Like I said, a couple things going on. Had a funeral to go to. We had some work drama at our day job. But you can check out this episode and every episode on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever a podcast can be found. And you can follow us on Twitter at @underratedpod. That's at _rated_pod.
Until next time.